My name's Eamon Grennan. I'm a gallery poet, of course. I'm being recorded here in Poughkeepsie, sweltering Poughkeepsie. Normally at this time of the year I'm over in Renville, where it's probably raining, but things changed for a lot of people and for the likes of us, of course, absolutely. It is a great pleasure for me, however, to take part in this 50th anniversary of Gallery Press. I've been with Gallery since 1983, and there are some who have been there before me, of course, and many who have been there since then. It's an extraordinary thing that Jean and Peter have, between them and between their great staff, made this contribution. An extraordinary thing in the way they have made this contribution to Irish literature, Irish poetry, and the general texture of Irish literary life. For me, being part of it, while at the same time living most of my life away in America, in Poughkeepsie for the most part, it's been a particular gift to be part of not only this reading, which celebrates, and very justly celebrates, 50 years of Gallery, but also to be part of the larger community that is taking us in and seeing what sort of context these poems create. Irish literature, Irish poetry will and would not ever have been the same without Gallery Press. I'm going to read 3 poems of my own and one from another Gallery poet, and I'll begin with a poem called Facts of Life, Ballymoney. This was the first poem in the first book I did for Gallery Press back in 1983, and called Widely for Days. Facts of Life, Ballymoney takes place in Ballymoney, County Wexford, where I was living with my wife then and 2 kids for the year. I'd gone back to Ireland after some time in this country, in America. And it just strikes the note that a lot of my work strikes, which is ordinary life, things as seen, things as recorded. That's all. Facts of Life, Ballymoney. I would like to let things be. The rain comes down on the roof, the small birds come to the feeder, the waves come slowly up the strand. 3 sounds to measure my hour here at the window: the slow swish of the sea, the squeak of hungry birds, the quick ticking of rain. Then, of course, there are the trees, bare for the most part, the grass wide open to the rain, clouds accumulating over the sea, the water rising and falling and rising, herring gulls bobbing on the water. They are killing cuttlefish out there, one at a time, without fuss. With a brisk little shake of the head, they rinse their lethal beaks. Rain swollen, the small stream twists between slippery rocks. That's all there's to it, spilling its own sound onto the sand. In one breath, one wink, all this melts to an element in my blood, and still it's possible to go on, simply living as if nothing had happened. Nothing has happened. Rain inching down the window, me looking out at the rain. The poem I'm reading now is by Kieran Carson, who died, alas, recently. It is from his last book, a magnificent volume of rich and stimulating and inspirational poems done under extraordinary pressure. It is a triumph, another one, for Gallery Press to have done this with Kieran. And I'm reading a small poem. So many of the poems are about paintings. I'm reading a small poem that has a painter's small painting in it, partly because I'd love to have written this poem. So it's something of professional kind of engagement with a colleague. And it's for Kieran. Of course I would read it for Kieran. Paul Cézanne, The Stove in the Studio, circa 1865. Since I saw it first in 1993, how often have I thought of Cézanne's studio stove, and the great big pot-bellied cast-iron black cauldron sitting squat on its top, with God knows what seething away in its belly, or sweet nothings in the pot. And the back of a canvas on a pine wood stretcher propped face to the wall, behind the stove, perhaps to dry, or not, and hard to figure from the chiaroscuro, a little painting or an artist's palette, and that tiny palette, would it be a sketch? And a pottery pot on the floor, and another dim something in the tiny room, all lit by the glow of a single red coal in the jaws of the coal-black cast-iron stove. The next poem I'll read is one of my own that makes a kind of couplet with Kieran's poem from his volume Still Life, and it's called The Cézanne Minute. It's how birds are awake to that single minute in the life of the world that keeps going by, that keeps you keeping a peeled eye on them in their infinitely minute changes of colour, as each speedy heartbeat hammers its own brisk rivet of breath onto air you're staring through at them, while "Breathe in now," says Cézanne, as he eyeballs another brilliant square inch of this perpetually unsettling here and now gone world, and hold it. This last very short poem I'm about to read is from my last book for Gallery Press, called There Now. The poem is called Anemones Beheld by Rachel. Rachel's my partner and is actually doing the video for this recording. Anemones Beheld by Rachel. How not look again at these vast anemones, whose thirsty stems drink up water for their ceremony of reds, purples, pinks, all dying for light, oozing through our dining room window, and all, look you, living for the moment in it and for the moment after that, as if on fire.
My name is Kerry Hardie. I'm making this video recording in celebration of the Gallery Press's 50th anniversary. Because of the COVID epidemic, this couldn't happen in the flesh. And before I start, I'd like to say how honoured I am to have been asked to take part in this celebration, and because Gallery have published 5 of my books and plus a selected, and they've always published them extremely well and to very high standard. I would also like to talk a little about Elaine Nihulinon, because I've been asked to say who of their authors has been a great influence on me. And I think from my earliest days as a poet, I would always take down one of Elaine's volumes when I started to write or to edit, because not only does she have an extraordinary quality of her work is very strange to me, because it is both very secret and very dreamlike, and it has also an extraordinary sculptural quality, which I think is a mark of her work. She knows how to use windows, doorways, spaces, cloisters, squares. It's always as though she's just glimpsing something through another door, through another door, through another door, and that is the secret. Now, I don't write anything like Elaine. I wish I could, but I don't. But the reason that her work has influenced me deeply is because I think when a poet's work enters you very deeply, it sparks off whatever is your own voice. So you don't have to end up writing like them. You just have to have been in their company. So the first of Elaine's poems that I'd like to read is from the second voyage, and it is called Night Journeys. There are more changes each time I return. 2 widows are living together in the attic among the encyclopedias and gold vestments. A fishmonger opens his shop at the angle of the stairs. The scullery I see has been extended, a wide cloister thatched, with swallows nesting over windows, now hides the garden. I wake in Rome and my brother, aged 15, meets me. My father has sent him with a naggin of coffee and brandy, which I drink on the platform. And wake again in an afternoon bed, grey light sloping from window ledge to straw-seated armchair. I get up, walk down a silent corridor to the kitchen. Twilight and a long scrubbed table. The tap drips in an enamel basin containing peeled potatoes. A door half open, and I can hear somebody snoring. See, windows, corridors, dreams. My own work contrasts very strongly with that in a sense because I write a lot about rural Kilkenny, which is where I live. I live on the Carlow-Kilkenny border looking out over the Blackstairs Mountains. And so my work doesn't have that urban sense of boundaries, definitions, doorways. Well, there are windows in it, of course, there are windows. Now, the first poem I want to read is just simply called Aussie Manstam. I read a lot of the Russians at one stage, at the stage I was writing this, and I love the way they use these sort of key words. So I wrote this as a tribute to Mandelstam, who was who died in a camp in a labour camp on the way to Vladivostok in 1938. Aussie Manstam. Swimming, it's best in the evening, best when the fish rise from the depths. How he could write, it was easy like swimming. Once he knew how, he couldn't unknow. He took words like mother and shadow and linen, wrote long lines of memory and sorrow and silence, of violins, young wives, her arms, her white thighs, of roosters and oxen and stairwells and dresses, of prisons and black earth and salt frost and bread. And far, far away, in the depths of the forest, the faint fading hum of Persephone's bees. Swimming, it's best in the evening, best when the day's past, all's lost, only night lies ahead. That was from my selected poems, which was also published by Blood Axe, who will be publishing my next book, which is in August, which is called Where Now Begins. The next poem I'd like to read is also influenced by a foreign poet. It begins with a quote from Rumi, who was a Persian poet writing in the 13th century, and he's the principal poet of Sufi Islam, and they're really big into surrender. And so the quote that starts it is this: "I am like an elephant. Beat me about the head with blows, so that I will not dream of India and gardens. No blows, I want to dream of India and gardens, to ignore the mahout, to set one great foot after the other, to sway off into the jungle, to tramp down to the river and wallow, to spray shining showers, to live in joy and pride and disobedience, to lift my trunk and trumpet the tremendous skies." The third poem is called Humankind. There's a figure of a red dog appears in this poem. It appears in several of my poems. The red dog is the poetic, horrible word. I think the red dog is the unconscious when it starts to stir in you and things happen. Humankind, we carry the trust. It was not imposed on us, nor are we heedless. Sometimes the stillness stands in the woods and lies on the lake. We move like drowned beings through clouded waters. Sometimes we wake to spent leaves blowing about in the yard. A door bangs. A woman, vigorous, shakes a rug into the wind. The red dog shudders and rises and listens. Uncertain light shines the grasses. Wealth sits in inner rooms, staring. These are our days. Walk them. Fear nothing. Thank you.
The first poem I'm going to read is from The Second Voyage by Elaine Quillenon, with Michael Caine's beautiful woodcut on the cover. The title of the poem is Swineherd, and rather than say anything about it, I just thought I'd quote what Seamus Heaney said about Elaine Quillenon's work. There is something second-sighted, as it were, about Elaine Quillenon's work, by which I don't mean that she has any prophetic afflatus, more that her poems see things anew in a rinsed and dream-struck light. They are at once as plain as an anecdote told on the doorstep, and as haunting as a soothsayer's greetings. Swineherd. When all this is over, said the swineherd, I mean to retire, where nobody will have heard about my special skills, and conversation is mainly about the weather. I intend to learn how to make coffee, at least as well as the Portuguese lay sister in the kitchen, and polish the brass fenders every day. I want to lie awake at night, listening to cream crawling to the top of the jug, and the water lying soft in the cistern. I want to see an orchard where the trees grow in straight lines, and the yellow fox finds shelter between the navy blue trunks, where it gets dark early in summer, and the apple blossom is allowed to wither on the bough. The two poems of my own I'm going to read are from my first book, Touching the Bones, which came out nearly 20 years ago now. The Scar. The first one is a love poem, I suppose, for my father, even if he does get shot in the leg. The Scar. Inventing the war I would send my father to. I come upon him sheltering in a foxhole, from a shower of shells or a shower of rain, in the tentative early days of the engagement. His weapon well greased and as yet unnamed, touching for the umpteenth time a sepia tint in his breast pocket of a woman I cannot name. Given time, he might be the crack shot of his unit, who whispers a prayer before he squeezes the trigger, and picks off in the belfry his opposite number, the runner who's breaking records behind the lines, or the loner who talks to no one and goes out alone at night like a poacher to dazzle rabbits and check on night lines, armed with only a flashlight and dagger, before he sustains a head wound or comes to grips with another petrified youngster like himself, whose will to live has strengthened under fire. I must ask him to undo his heavy pants in order to send him home with a flesh wound to the thigh, and bear with him when he goes back in the future to retell his version of how he came by this scar. The other poem I should read really is the title poem of this book, Touching the Bones. It starts with a wildlife documentary about elephants and goes on from there. Touching the Bones. The wildlife documentary on elephants showed 4 of them finding the bones of a huge bull strayed from the herd, lying by a dried up watering hole, bones bleached and half submerged in dust, his rib cage like the rib cage of a boat, the feet chopped off for pots, the huge tusks gone, and sunk beside him, the frailer skeleton of a calf that went off after him, not knowing he was going off to die, his frame picked clean of meat, the fontanelle still open like a bullet hole. The others made a circle there and grieved, the great majestic grief of elephants, throwing their heads back and blorting through their trunks, like my mother and father in the hallway when the news came through, touching the indentations of the loved ones' skulls with the soft ends of their trunks, snuffling at the holes, inhaling the last traces of the lost lives. They rubbed their skin against them, and rolled the skulls in dust as if to wash death from them, then turned their backs on the bones and nudged them tenderly in a circle with their huge heels. We grieve because the dead forget us. We bury their bodies in boxes underground, and when we chance on them in sleep, and reach to bring the skulls up to our lips, to slake our griefs in their crevices and curves, to roll the shin bones and the thigh bones and the ribs in dust, to touch them with our flesh, our dream hands reaching toward them, make us wake.